I'm the co-CEO of DC Studios. This first chapter is called Gods and Monsters. The first project is Creature Commandos. Creature Commandos is an animated series. I've written all the episodes. Something we're going to do that's a little bit different at DC is we're going to have characters move into animation, out of animation, usually having the same actor play their voice as who plays them in live action.
As a lifelong DC fan, it is an exciting time because we are entering a new era as Creature Commandos marks the first official start of the DCU. It's crazy to me because opening this universe with an animated series is kind of a full circle moment for me, considering that my first time experiencing anything DC related was actually seeing the Batman animated series back in the day, and honestly for a while DC animated movies were carrying the DC for me, and it had some of the best projects out during that time. So again, it only feels right that we kick off this new universe in the form of animation. So let's have some fun and recap and discuss these first 2 episodes of Creature Commandos, spoilers ahead. We open with Waller and Rick Flag Sr. watching breaking news: the sons of the Mascara, led by Circe, who have crossed the borders and attacking Bakalova. Now Circe's promised to take these group of men to the Mascara, where she believes that she's the rightful leader. I gotta say, man, the commentary by the sons of the Mascara was just hilarious.
I mean, seriously, the Mascara is like the sickest place ever, and then you tell me, oh dude, only women can live there? What? That's so sexist, bruh.
Word is they have the most incredible waterfalls. I have this question for all the woke feminists out there. Why do only girls get such cool waterfalls? All over the world, our rights as men are being denigrated.
Now in the comics, Bakalova is a tiny fragment of the broken up Czech Republic, is often described as a war-torn nation, and also being complex and complicated with its political landscape and military conflicts. Now for those that aren't too familiar with Circe, she is a very cool supervillain within the DC comics, and she's based within the Greek mythology. She's known for being a very powerful sorceress and a major adversary to the superhero Wonder Woman. Now there's been a lot of speculation online that Anya, who voices the character Circe, who I'm a big fan of from The Witcher, she will play a major role within the DCU, as James Gunn himself has already confirmed that most of the actors voicing these characters will most likely reprise their role in live action. Now Waller fills Flag in on the importance of the relationship between the US military and Palokistan, whose natural resources are very valuable. Now the mission at hand is to protect and defend the princess of Palokistan from any possible attacks from Circe in order to protect their relationship with her in the negotiations on their oil. Now for my Peacemaker Season 1 fans out there, here we get our very first reference to what happened in the finale, as Rick Flag Sr. mentions that Task Force X being shut down after Waller was outed by her daughter. As Waller describes how she was able to get away with this, as she explains this loophole, as she says,
"Technically, Congress said Argus can't use incarcerated human beings as mission operatives any longer. But what about beings that aren't human?"
From here, Waller shows Flag the Belle Reve No Human Internment Division that has been around for over 50 years. Now here we meet the team. We have the dead corpse known as the Bride, the sociopath known as Dr. Phosphorus, and of course we remember the Weasel from the Suicide Squad, as Waller says that he was one of the few survivors of Project Starfish. Now with Waller saying that he was one of the survivors makes me think that the door is still open for Margot Robbie to return as Harley Quinn. Now within the same conversation, we see that Waller mentions the death of Rick Flag Sr., which is still a very sensitive topic for Flag. Now we also have the Nazi killer G.I. Robot, and last but not least, we have the mermaid hybrid Dr. Nina Mazursky. As Waller brings Flag to meet them in person, they immediately attack Waller, but she's always 10 steps ahead as she disables them by using a device attached to their heads, and Flag is officially introduced to Task Force M, also known as the Creature Commandos, as the title card drops. I thought it was pretty funny to see James Gunn himself within the title sequences, as we know he's the creator and writer of the show, as the first ever project of the DCU kicks off. Now right off the bat, I gotta say, I really enjoyed this opening sequence because I love the fact that we're just dropped right into the situation. We're right in this world, there's no extra fat, there's no unnecessary exposition, we're just hitting the ground running into this new DCU. Now off they go on their first mission, as Flag is met with sarcasm by the group with their enthusiasm about serving the US military. Now we get some banter between the group before they arrive as they talk about Weasel's murderous past with kids and his traumatic experience from the last mission, as the bride learns of where they're headed and seems to have a past experience here. Now, as they land, they're introduced to the princess's military and they arrive to the palace, where they're under the impression that the princess would probably look horrendous based on the family portraits on the wall, but as she arrives, Flag finds her to be the complete opposite of ugly, as she is extremely beautiful. As the team is given the honorary guest treatment by getting the finest food in the country, we see this is a major upgrade from the prison food they've been given before. As we get a chance to see the group kind of lay back and get to know each other, all before the fighting eventually comes their way, as we see Flag and the princess are clearly hitting it off. Now within this conversation, we see Flag briefly talks about his first wife, and who happens to be the mother of Rick Flag Jr., who they had at the age of 18. As Flag brings up his son's death again, and here we get a better idea of the timeline from when the Suicide Squad happens to when the show starts, as it's mentioned that it's been over 2 years. Now the princess is very straightforward about her sexual desires, as she has a thing for older men, as she makes her move towards Rick by taking him into her room and removing her clothes, but Rick Flag keeps things very professional. He declines her offer to having sex as we watch everyone head off to bed. Now as the team winds down for the night, we see the bride escapes as Nia follows her in order to tempt her from leaving, as well as avoid from getting shocked again, but unfortunately it doesn't work as she follows her into town to visit a place from her past. Now with the interactions between these two characters, you kind of get a sense that Nia will be like the heart of the team and be the one who seems the most kind-hearted towards everyone, and knowing James Gunn's previous work, she will most likely be the one character that's going to probably get hurt really badly or sacrifice herself or even maybe die by the end in order to protect the team, which will most likely bring the group together in order to avenge her. Back at the palace, Dr. Phosphorus tries to steal Rick Flag's phone, but he awakes, leading to our very first fight of the show between the characters. I gotta say this fight was pretty visually pleasing, but we also get to see Flag can definitely handle his own against a metahuman one-on-one, as this fight leads them into the kitchen where Flag ultimately wins by getting the upper hand. Now, I personally believe that Rick Flag got the upper hand because obviously he's the more skilled person in combat. He has experience probably with other metahumans, and I also get a sense that the Doc is still kind of learning what he's capable of when it comes to his powers. Now, Flag ultimately doesn't electrify him with the device because he tells him,
"Phosphorus, you idiot! You think Waller would give me the only remote? You'd be hopping around like a Mexican jumping bean for days if you escaped. Or, if I told her about this, I'm not here to torture you. We're supposed to be on the same damn team."
Now, the sympathy that Flag shows the Doc, this kind of shows me his moral compass. He doesn't see these monsters as expendables like Waller does, and for that, I can see them respecting Flag and him looking at them as more than just monsters as they're labeled as. Now, we end this first episode with discovering the importance of this country for the bride, as this is the land of her birthplace as they arrive to the doorsteps of where she was created. Now, one of the locals who's been keeping watch of this place sees that she's arrived and she calls her boss, Eric Frankenstein. As we see that he's off on a boat, and we see him shedding a tear of happiness to receive the news that his bride has returned home. Now, just sharing my quick thoughts here before we get into episode 2, I thought this was a pretty fun episode. Like I mentioned earlier, I love the fact that we just get right into the mission and we get right into things. Now, personally, I think the animation fits the style and the tone they're going for. And when it comes to the comedy beats, I much more prefer when James Gunn does the more subtle comedy versus the more overt comedy moments. And when it comes to the characters, I enjoy them so far. I really think that Nia and the bride are my favorites. And I really love Frank Grillo as an actor, and I'm a fan of his. And I'm really excited to see the future of Rick Flag Sr. within the context of the show, going into Superman and ultimately going into Peacemaker as well. And overall, like I said, I really like the dynamics of this group so far. Now, I do think based on the number of characters, moving forward, I can imagine that we'll get their tragic backstories as we move along, and I am overly excited to see more of the DC universe and this DC world and other characters as each episode goes along. So with that said, I would give this first premiere episode a solid 7 out of 10. Not mind-blowing like something that we got from a few years ago, like I think about the premiere episode of Invincible, but again, it was a fun, easy breezy introduction episode. Which leads us right into my thoughts and breakdown of episode 2, spoilers ahead. Now, we open this episode in 1831 with seeing parts of bodies disattached. Here we see the origins of the creation of the bride, which is very similar to the elements of the characters from the novels and previous works of the character throughout the years. Now we meet Victor Frankenstein as he listens to his creation's reasonings to creating his bride. Now Eric is pleased to know that his father will help him and deciding to lend a hand in creating Eric finding his true love. Now we cut back to the final moments of episode 1 where we see the bride and Nina walking around Victor's place of work where he experimented as a renegade as the bride viewed him as. Here we flash back to the actual days that she was born where we see her entering the world with sheer force and fear with Eric immediately invading her space. Now ultimately we learn that the bride is here looking for a particular gemstone. As we get more flashes of seeing Eric Frankenstein's anger being on display as he's growing to be impatient about the bride's progress. Now eventually we see Nina finds the gemstone and we clearly see that this has a deeper meaning for the bride. Again, we see that the bride and Nina are the complete opposite of each other, but we get a sense that there's like this big sister, little sister energy going on between the two characters, and I think Nina's innocence and kindness will eventually grow on the bride. As we see more of Eric's anger in the flashbacks, he is just upset because the bride isn't in love with him like the same way that he's in love with her, as we see how Victor and the bride ultimately are growing closer together as he's teaching her various different things about the world. Now we learn the importance of the gemstone as it was ultimately a gift that was given to her by Victor, who we can clearly see that she admired and also loved. Back at the palace, we see Flag has his wounds attended to by the princess, who is still pursuing him and making her moves to get him in bed. Now, despite his best efforts, the princess reminds him that she will soon to be the queen and makes her last move by cornering him and kissing him, which ultimately leads him to finally giving in as they have sex very loudly while everyone outside listens in. Now, meanwhile, during all this, we see that Circe is very fully aware of the Task Force M's presence in this country as she plans to introduce herself, but first, she pays a visit to the bride and Nina and she attacks them, leading the group to heading their way for reinforcements. Now, here we get a very fun action sequence between Circe and her sons of Themyscira versus the bride and Nina. Now, here we get to see just how strong the bride is as she is able to take out the sons of Themyscira with ease while also avoiding Circe's magical powers. Now, I could be wrong, but there seems to be a history between these two characters, or at least that's the vibe that I got from this scene, especially from Circe, who seems to have been waiting for the bride to be separated from the rest of the group. Now, Circe attacking the bride could be the warrior nature from her and her kind of taking tips from the Amazonians to take out the most powerful or the strongest enemy first, or at least someone that she's threatened by. Again, I really enjoyed this action sequence, and I really enjoyed this moment here of seeing the bride throwing the car at Circe and she splits it in half with her magical abilities, and just watching them go toe to toe, flying in the air, flying through the castle was just awesome to see. Again, we get to see the bride's strength as she gets some good licks in against this sorceress, but she ultimately gets distracted by remembering things from her past, including seeing her and Victor, who were romantically involved, as we get the shot of Eric seeing all this take place. Now, the bride is down for a second in this fight, but she manages to regain the upper hand and she's going for the final blows, but she ends up getting her hands turned into inflatable arms. Now, meanwhile, while Nina's trying to get in contact with Flag, we see that she gets shot in her glass head as we watch both of these characters laying in defeat. Now, this moment brings the bride to her lowest moment of her remembering what happened when she found Victor dead by the hands of Eric, whose jealousy got the best of him. As we get these flashes of time of her escaping Eric, and we get to see this feud between the two as he uses his brute force to approach the bride all the way from 1852 to 1880 to 1895 into 1912, 1923, 1941, 1964 into 1991, and all the way throughout time as she's fighting him and avoiding him at the same time. Now back to present day, we see the bride apologize to Nia, who tells her to go screw herself as they're both captured by the sons of Themyscira. First and foremost, I need round 2 like immediately between the bride and Circe because I just thought that fight was so epic. I personally love the proper power scaling in this fight, like not to make this an MCU versus DCU conversation, but when I think about the MCU and their power scaling, especially in recent memory, for example, I think about Spider-Man No Way Home when we had Doctor Strange versus Spider-Man and Doctor Strange getting bested by Spider-Man in the mirror dimension. But as I digress, this fight between the characters felt right in the sense of magic versus strength and endurance, and I'm really excited to see more of the fighting moving forward in this series. Now, my thoughts on this second episode, I thought that this one was a little bit more focused on giving us the bride tragic backstory of her and her creator's relationship, as well as adding in Eric into the mix and her fighting him throughout time, which is very interesting to me. Again, I thought the action fight scene between Circe and the bride was very impressive and showcased how powerful the both characters are. Even though the bride was being rude to Nina, I like like how Nina just remained to be by her side, and she was kind of giving her moral support as they were going through the house of Victor Frankenstein or going through the experimental house. And by the end, we saw that the bride did feel bad for pulling her into the situation and seeing her injured, as we know that the rest of the team is headed their way. And I'm just really intrigued to see, again, this big sister, little sister relationship develop over the rest of this series. Now, I also got to mention, I like how Eric is now getting into the mix, Eric Frankenstein, and I'm assuming that he will be a part of the rescue team and part of the rescue mission to get Nina and the bride back. And just seeing more of the dynamic between the bride and Eric will be very interesting, as well as, again, seeing him being integrated with the rest of the team. Now, if I were to have a negative thing to say, is I really didn't enjoy the soundtrack of both episodes, which is crazy to say because I've seen all of James Gunn's projects, and one of the things that are very consistent is he has incredible taste in music, and I love the selection of music he decides to put in his movies and also how it integrates with the characters. And I get that the songs are supposed to match the country theme, like being within that culture, and I understand that, but I just wasn't a fan of the music, and it just didn't really vibe with me, at least in these first 2 episodes. So overall, like episode 1, I had fun with episode 2, and I'm really excited to see more of these characters' stories, and apparently it looks like Circe will be the main big bad of this season, which I'm totally down for. So I would say I would slightly give this episode a higher rating than episode 1. I'll give this episode a 7.5 out of 10. So overall, with these first 2 episodes, yes, I'm going to speak to it. It definitely feels like Guardians of the Galaxy and Suicide Squad had an animated baby. And guess what? I love both of those movies. So the chances are I'm going to really enjoy this series. But it doesn't mean that it won't be a flawless show. It's going to have its issues. But nonetheless, I am very excited to go on this journey for the next 7 weeks with you all. So before we wrap up, check out my short reactions on the channel now to these episodes. Please share your thoughts on both episodes. Which one did you enjoy over the other? What was your favorite moment? Who's your favorite character so far? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up, but also consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. You all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.